really focused on older people and aged care because it's not a sexy area. It's an area that we're all going to face ourselves as we age, or our families or our loved ones. Supporting people at the end of their lives is a privilege. You need a care team. That's the first thing to realise. You need at least someone else to help you. Okay, I'm Kate Lamont from Thrive Aged Care, and I'm on a mission to change the way that we provide aged care in Australia.
And I'm Kirby. I'm also from Thrive Aged Care, and like Kate, I have a passion for improving care for older people everywhere.
And I'm Gillett, and this is the Power of Women podcast. We're a platform that showcases and celebrates the strength, resilience and achievements of women from all walks of life. And today's episode is going to bring that into focus in a deeply personal way, because this conversation is about care, aging, and the choices we'll all likely face at some point in our lives, whether it's planning for your own future or stepping in to support a parent or a partner. Aged care is a journey that can be confronting, it can be emotional, and I know personally it can be incredibly confusing. However, it does not have to be, and today we're joined by two women changing the landscape of aged care in Australia, Kirby and Kate Lamont, to help us navigate this complex path with greater clarity, greater compassion, and greater confidence. Kirby and Kate Lamont, welcome to the Power of Women podcast.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks, Di. Great to be here.
Could I begin with the two of you? And I know you've been in the industry for a while, but why have you made this laser-like focus on aged care?
So, Di, my background is an occupational therapist, and over 20 years ago when I started, the majority of people that I supported were older people, and I absolutely loved it. But I'm also a person who has to do things better. So I landed in a lot of work that was around improvement and leading projects and constantly looking at what we're doing and can we do things better. And I guess that's where I am today. With Thrive Aged Care, we're really focused on older people and aged care because it's not a sexy area. Yeah, it's not an area that gets talked a lot in a positive way in health or aged care. And it's an area that we're all going to face ourselves as we age, or our families or our loved ones. And really, for me, it's about how can we uplift the sector. We've got amazing people working in our sector, but how can we showcase that it is really a specialty and it's a place that people should want to work? Supporting people at the end of their lives is a privilege. And how can we really attract more people to work in that space?
Kath, how do you add to that?
Oh, it's hard to add to, isn't it? But I mirror everything that Kate says. I've always worked with older people, even back when I was training to be a nurse. Being a nurse was something that I've wanted to do since my earliest primary school memory. But I've always been drawn to older people, and particularly people living with dementia, and also the carers, so the family members I've always been heavily involved with as well in all of my roles. And just like Kate was saying, very passionate about uplifting aged care, uplifting the care that we provide for older people, and also bringing about more awareness about how important it is and what a specialty area it is, because like Kate was saying, it's not an area that is seen as sexy. Even back in the day when I was first a nurse, it wasn't an area that people looked at as wanting to go to. It was looking at as a place that everyone goes to die, really, even as a nurse. It's your last place that you go to work, and it's so much more than that, and our older people deserve better, and so do the people that work in aged care.
So how do you describe the current state of aged care in Australia? And my question is, and having been through the journey like so many of us at this sort of age have with a family member, are we getting it right?
Aged care is complex. Yeah. So the care is complex. Yeah, like Kath and I were saying, it's really a specialty, but unfortunately the sector is very complex and I think it's really difficult to navigate. Yeah, but I think we are on the right track to make change. There are changes coming about. We've been waiting over a year for some sector reforms. They've just been recently delayed again for another 3 months, which shows how complex the environment is. You know, they've been delayed to give providers and clients, aged care clients, more time to understand what the reforms are going to be. The reason I think we are on the right track, though, is we've had such a focus on aged care over the last few years. We've had the Royal Commission into aged care, which I think everyone in Australia has heard about in some way. And it was really needed. Yeah, it shone a light on lots of systematic issues for aged care and for older people in Australia. And it shone a light on providers who weren't necessarily doing the right thing. But what the Royal Commission didn't do was it didn't highlight the providers that are doing the right thing. And I think we need to remember that. There are a lot of providers out there, a lot of aged care leaders and teams and workers who go above and beyond and really do care deeply about the people that they're caring for. So I think we need to make sure we remember that. It's not all doom and gloom for aged care in Australia.
And I think that's like anything, isn't it? I think that's like anything where it's the tendency is to call out the bad news and not celebrate the good news.
100%.
Yeah. And look, we've got some new standards coming in, which is fantastic. And they've all come about because of the gaps that the Royal Commission highlighted. And Kath, we love the standards, don't we?
No, absolutely. There's so much opportunity for us to do things differently, to improve on the changes that were already implemented with the old new standards that came in about 5 years ago. And there's lots of more change that is coming through with these new reforms. And while, you know, there are challenges, it's not going to be an easy fix. You know, when you've got multiple systems that are across Australia and lots of people involved, there are going to be teething issues, but ultimately we are really excited for these reforms to come in. We're really excited for what it's going to look like for the people receiving aged care and for the people, you know, the family members who are trying to navigate these very complicated systems, because they're complicated not just for people who are family members, but also for health professionals at the moment. You know, there's still a few challenges there. It's not, so if you're finding yourself as a person trying to navigate the system for a family member and you're finding challenges, don't feel like it's just you, because it is the system, but it is going to change and it will be much better in the long run. We just have to get through this, you know, this next few months.
And it's interesting. This aged care journey is something that's inevitable, that we're either going to be facing into as an ageing person ourselves or looking after somebody else. But so many of us don't do anything until that moment is right upon us, and there's no guidebook, or it feels like there's no guidebook, and it feels like it's hard to find where to go. When's the right time to start? And I suspect it's earlier rather than before we get there. Can you help us with that?
I would suggest the earlier the better, and it all starts with a conversation, and it's often a conversation that we're not comfortable having. And sometimes it might be the older person, but a lot of the time it's us, the younger people who are not wanting to have that conversation when mum or dad or auntie or uncle bring it up with us. And it's really important that we need to think ahead and pre-plan, because exactly like you were saying, oftentimes when we're starting to need to access aged care services, it's in a time of crisis. And when you're in a time of crisis, the last thing that you're wanting to be doing is trying to navigate multiple systems, trying to have conversations that you could have had a lot earlier, trying to get paperwork and understand a person's wishes, because you've got other things on your mind at that time. So the earlier that you can have these conversations, or the earlier that somebody wants to have this conversation with you, the better. And we just need to try and be a little bit better at embracing this and looking at it as an opportunity rather than something that might make us feel uncomfortable, but we need to think about future planning, because every time, it doesn't matter what department I've worked in palliative care, I've worked in aged care, I've worked in lots of different settings, and it's often the same scenario, and it is not the time that you want to be having these personal conversations. So earlier the better.
And I know, it wouldn't be uncommon in many households where there's those throwaway lines of "don't you dare do this" and "don't you dare do that" as your parents are looking toward the future. If we look at that particular cohort, and I think all of that plays in the back of our minds too. Of it's a tough conversation to have.
It certainly is, and I think it's knowing what trigger points as well, because you're right, Di, there are throwaway lines, and I hear them in my house with my parents and my aunties and uncles as well. But I think you need to really understand how that person wants to live their life, or you, how you want to live your life, and when is the point that might mean that you need to make a decision. Yeah, and knowing about that, because and really trying to understand that, when's the point, and having some control. It's always better to have some control in decision making rather than you're in a crisis and the control and choice and decision is taken off you. And that's what we like to say to people we work with.
And I think it's that loss of control. It's something foreign. It's something new that becomes so confronting. And to that point, are there common misconceptions or, in fact, blind spots that families are getting wrong as they face into this?
I think the blind spots and the misconceptions might be that it's going to be easy. And we know that. We've talked about it's a complex system to navigate. So don't think that it's necessarily going to be easy. But there are supports out there to help you navigate the system as well. I think the other thing is that, quite often it might be the first time that anyone's experienced the aged care system, that you're having to navigate it as well. It might be that you haven't had that experience before. So I think, allowing extra time for planning or thinking about it is really important. And I think the other thing is people think it's going to happen instantly, that suddenly you need that service and it's going to be available for you, but that's not necessarily the way it works. Again, why having a plan in place will make the transition a bit easier.
Yeah, and that's a really important point. And I think first time round you're caught off guard. Second time round is potentially a little easier. But to your point, Kate, it's not an immediate switch on solution. There are a number of hurdles to go through, and those hurdles can take time, and they're complicated and they're time intensive. So. I know from personal experience, first time round, if we'd been better prepared, it would have been better for everybody involved. When it comes time to make that decision, it can seem really overwhelming because there's a number of different choices, and I think there's probably more choices now than perhaps even if we look back 4 or 5 years ago, because there's more home care options that seem to be appearing. There's residential aged care, there's respite, there's supported living. All of those have different implications emotionally and financially. What are the biggest factors one needs to consider when weighing up what's the best option for their family or friend or loved one?
I think we need to start with the older person, and it comes back to having those conversations early on and knowing what's important to them. What does healthy aging and good aging look like for the person? And maybe it is staying in their own home for as long as possible. Maybe they're happy to transition into care, but at a certain point and a certain location. It's about having those conversations early on, but then also understanding what quality of life looks like for the older person. And like Kate was saying, rightly so, for the person who would likely take on that carer role. So what is important to everybody who's involved? What are the things that we need to be aware of, and how can we make that happen? And that comes back to that pre-planning, because, without knowing what is important and to help guide those decisions. Because when we have a really frank and open conversation, it becomes a lot more open to the opportunities that are out there. Because, commonly the answer is, don't put me in aged care. I don't want to go to residential aged care. I'm going to stay in my home. But what is it that is the fear behind going into aged care? Is it that loss of independence? Is it that loss of community? Being able to engage in things that you used to do day to day? Is it the fact that you live in a regional area on a big property, and you built your house and you've lived there for 70 years, and now all of a sudden you're going to a room? What is it that's driving that decision? What's the why behind it? We're very much about the why at Thrive, because then when you understand what the why is, then you can get to the how. So what is the next step? Which approach can we take? What options do we have out there? So the more information that we have, the better. And like you're right, Di, there's so much more out there now than there used to be. And I know that you mentioned respite, and I would just really like to encourage your listeners to consider respite earlier on, because respite is not necessarily easy to access. There's often wait lists, and it's often, it's not something that we want to have our older person going into. But again, the more prepared you are, my experience is oftentimes, more than not, when somebody goes into respite for the first time, it can be a challenge for the first maybe couple of days, but then more times than often, the experience is a lot better than what they expected it to be. And the older person who's receiving the respite care actually quite enjoys it. Not the case all of the time, but a lot more times than not. That's the experience. So it's just, taking those initial steps. So I would really encourage people to look at respite early on as well, and consider that as an option.
How much of the decision around, and you may or may not be able to answer this, but I know it was something I sort of tortured myself with, and I become somewhat judgmental in observing it in others. How much of the decision to progress forward to putting somebody in aged care is about what's best for the individual versus what might be best for the person making the decision on behalf of somebody else?
That's a very tough question, but I think it's a question that we need to talk about today, because I think you can try your hardest to respect the wishes of the person that you're caring for, but you're a care partner. Yeah, so you're a partner in their care, and that's why you need to have that discussion, that open discussion about what if this happened, or talking to the person you're caring for about, what the trigger point might be. Yes, you want to stay home as long as possible. I understand that. But what if you needed 24-hour care? Or what if your situation changed? What could the plan be there? But I think carers need to know that when you're a carer, one person can't necessarily be the carer for the older person or the person living with dementia. You need a care team. That's the first thing to realise. You need at least someone else to help you. So it kind of becomes a 3-person kind of situation. Yeah. And you have a say, I think, as the person providing care. Your health and well-being is important. And that's why having a bit of a discussion about, when we get to this point, what does it look like then for us?
And where does all of that get sort of blown out of the water when it comes down to finances? Because aged care's got a cost to it. It's complicated. It's expensive.
Yeah, and it's going to change. So come 1 of November, when we have these aged care reforms, we're going to see changes. And we don't know what those changes look like as yet for the care at home. It's going to be called support at home. But there will be more impetus on a user pays model. Yeah. So services deemed non-clinical, like personal care, help in the shower, help getting showered and dressed, might be, this is what the government is telling us, we're yet to have it confirmed, but might be where user pays. So I think it changes really the landscape a little bit. What we're seeing are more probably private companies popping up where the user's going to pay, so they're going to pick what services they want and by who is going to deliver those services. And I guess, with that approach also in residential aged care, people are, I think, thinking more about staying home. Yep. If residential aged care is going to cost me X amount, what can I do to stay home? What services can I bring in? So I think the reforms are going to change the financial impetus, and it's something that you need to be aware about. And I mean, we're coming in, we've got different people entering aged care. We've got people who are the baby boomers, who have more access to super and things like that, more self-funded retirees potentially. So I think the financial impact of aged care is going to change, and it's something that we need to watch because we're a bit unsure about the reforms until they come into place.
And user pays fine on the assumption that all the baby boomers have done well, but that won't be the case. So that's
that's
could
going to be
a
interesting
vexed conversation.
Too. Yeah, and how does that impact on choice?
Yeah. Well, coming up, let's dive into what is probably one of the most challenging aspects of the aged care journey, and that's dementia. And also, let's look at how carers actually look after their own well-being. If you're loving the Power of Women podcast, be sure to jump onto our YouTube channel and hit that subscribe button to ensure you never miss an episode. I'm really interested because I know both of you are strong advocates of TEEPA Snow and her approach to dementia care. For those listening who've never heard the name TEEPA Snow before, could you give us some sense of who TEEPA is and what makes her model so powerful?
TEEPA is amazing. TEEPA is an American occupational therapist and really a dementia expert. She's had over 40 years of experience working with people with brain change, which is really interesting. So not just people with dementia, but people with all different forms of brain change. Yeah. And what she's done from all that experience is she's developed this method of how to really provide supportive care, how to understand the change that's happening in the person's brain, and then how to adapt your approach to really, I guess, maximise the skills and strengths that remain with the person. And then, you're uplifting them by just filling the gaps, basically. And the reason why her training is so amazing and why we've fallen in love with it at Thrive, and we're trained in her approach, so we're on a mission to share her approach. And the reason why we're doing that is because it's like nothing that we've seen before in Australia. Yeah, it's evidence-based, but it's simple and practical and teaches how. It doesn't just teach the why and then let you try and fill in the gaps yourself. It actually teaches hands-on practical skills. And that's really what people supporting people living with dementia need. They need hands-on practical skills. They need to understand what's changing in that person's brain. What am I seeing? And then let's think about why I'm seeing that. And what can I do to support the person, to keep them as independent as possible, to reduce stress, to engage and connect with them, so that I'm setting them up for success. And that's what we love about TEEPA's approach.
I would have loved to have been exposed to that rather than perhaps what I was on the receiving end in our household, which was none of it sounded as engaging and as caring as that approach. So when someone you love starts to change and we don't fully understand it, how can families reframe what's happening, and how do we respond then with empathy rather than all of this reactive behaviour that's driven more by fear than the empathetic side of our process and thoughts?
So I think the first thing is understanding what's going on for that person. And like we said with TEEPA's approach, it's understanding what changes actually happen in the brain for someone living with dementia. So that when you see something, you don't have to be afraid of it. You don't have to label it. You can just get curious and try and understand why that's happening. And then you can start to think about what could I do differently to minimise that happening.
Could you give us an example, Kate, of a real-life example that might happen in a day-to-day setting?
Something that we see all the time in residential aged care, or what we hear about, is people becoming aggressive with personal care. Now, personal care is very intimate. You're in someone's intimate space and you're helping them with very intimate tasks to start with, yeah? But thinking about that, it's our approach. And one example that people are unaware of is that with dementia, your field of vision changes, it shrinks. So at the moment, we have a very broad field of vision. And as we age naturally, it reduces. We start seeing people maybe in their 70s, their head checks become a bit more body movement. So you're seeing normal aging and normal shrinkage of field of vision. But for people with, let's say, moderate dementia, it's like they're walking around with binoculars on. That is their field of vision. So anything on the outside, I can't see. And of course, where we position ourselves is very important. If we're coming in from the side or if we're leaning in on the person, we're changing what they see. And what remains with people living with dementia is strength, their primitive brain, their ability to try and keep themselves safe. So if I'm scared by something, if I don't see your hand and it comes in on my shoulder because you're standing to the side, I might hit your hand away because I don't know who you are and what you're trying to do. So that is an example that we see all the time. So it's just thinking about the sensory changes that happen for people living with dementia and then how we change our approach. So, knowing about the field of vision, we can stand in a different spot so someone can actually see us. We can wait until they see us before we move our hands in.
Is there another gold nugget like that? Because that is a single bit of knowledge that you've given that I think is massively useful for somebody understanding somebody going through cognitive change. Is there a couple of other examples like that you might be able to share for listeners?
For sure. I'm going to hand over to Kath because she was probably thinking of one as I was sharing that one.
I was thinking of language as well. So we talk a lot and we use a lot of words. And, I remember myself as a nurse coming, even when I was recently, I do some carer work in the community. And the tendency is to talk fast and talk with a lot of words. But what happens is, again, with that moderate state dementia, we tend to lose about 1 in 4 words. So if I start talking and then something, come, shower, and you're hearing a conversation where you're missing a portion, then how able are you going to be, or how willing are you going to be to participate in something with me? If I'm missing 1 in 4 words and the further you progress, it's 1 in 3. So another tip that we have is using less words and using more visual cues. So instead of saying, "Hey Di, how are you this morning? Oh, I'm going to make a cup of tea, Mum. Do you want to have a cup of tea? Shall I make you a cup of tea and we'll have a biscuit?" That's a lot of information for a person to take in. And you've got to imagine the changes in the brain as well. That information has to come in, it has to go all around your brain and be interpreted and then be able to respond. So if you're having trouble, firstly, if I'm talking to Mum from the side and she can't see me, and then I'm also throwing out a whole lot of words, and then I'm not giving Mum time to respond because I'm in a hurry, I've got things to do, then we're not going to get a response, or we're not going to get a response that we want. So what we would like to do is use less words and use more cues. So for example, "Hey Di, coffee?" "Yep." simple. Yeah. So less words, more visual cues. And then from there, we can assist people more. So like Kate was saying, TEEPA's approach is all about working with a person's strengths, but not taking over, which is what we tend to do as well. And this is, family members, because I've seen this happen many times. It's people being very helpful, and we tend to be in a rush ourselves. So therefore we rush the person. But we need to understand that we need to give the person about 3 seconds initially, even just to have that information come in, process it, and then give them time to respond as well, before we start coming in and getting the cup and trying to help mum drink that cup of coffee. So starting off with less words, more visual cues, and giving that time is a really key approach to try as well.
And that is, again, such useful information, because I think the automatic response when somebody's not responding back to you is to talk more, because people don't like the silence, and we fill the silence. And in fact, we probably end up using a lot more words than typically we would use in any dialogue or engagement, and we're doing completely the wrong thing.
We are, but it's all of us. It's carers as well. This is the stuff that we teach to health professionals, and it's something, because we're all busy in our heads, whether we're health professionals or we're a person caring for mum and dad. We've dropped the kids off at daycare. Now I've got to take her to an appointment. So now I've got to go pick her up. She's not ready, and we're all in that fast pace.
Done at pace. Yep.
Yeah. So it's something that you have to practice doing. And I'm saying that because I practice myself, and I catch myself out at times, and I have to take a breath myself. And that's a really good tip to share with carers, is to just take a breath, take that 3 seconds and do 3-5 deep breaths. And it calms your own nervous system down, and it naturally slows things down. Because it's
the
no one
3, 4,
trying
5
to
method.
intentionally, not intentionally, cause agitation or upset the person. It's the state that we're all living in. It's the world that we live in. We live in a very fast-paced world. So taking that time to take a breath, it actually makes a really big difference.
So talking about the carer, and I think that's something that's not talked about enough. I mean, the automatic reaction when talking with friends, going through this, you ask, how is your mother, or how is your father? And it's the same with somebody looking after somebody with illness. And we forget to say, how are you, as the person doing the actual caring. How do we help carers support themselves?
I think it's really important to acknowledge that carers don't like to look after themselves. And again, this is something that I've seen over 21 years of working in the industry, is that carers are always going to put the person they're caring for first. So firstly, it is asking that question, how are you? And really listening, because sometimes we ask that question, but we don't want to hear that answer. Yeah. Or, the answer is, I'm fine. And then we tick that box that we've asked. But little things, sharing experiences, sharing supports that are available, just going around and being there for the person is really important. Offering to stay with mum for half an hour while you go down and get your nails done. Something small, which you might think is not significant, can be really significant for the carer. And the carer, we know that there's about 3 million unpaid carers in Australia, and that was 2022. And most of the carers are women, which, are your listeners out there. And if we don't look after ourselves, you are not going to be able to look after the person you're caring for. And we are really bad, and I think as women in particular, we are really bad at putting ourselves first at times. So I cannot, and I've been in this situation myself, and it is really hard, but it's taking that focus and even scheduling in a time half an hour, 3 days a week for yourself, and taking somebody on that offer to assist, or engaging those services that we spoke about earlier. But just schedule it in, put it in your diary, put it in your calendar, and see it as something for your person that you're caring for. Because if you crash and burn, then what's going to happen to the person that you're looking after?
So we take one step back even further, and where somebody in our universe is playing the carer role, what should we be looking out for in terms of telltale signs perhaps that they're struggling?
I think if people are becoming less engaged in things that they used to do, so not going to social events, or not responding as often as they would, or not wanting to go out for that half an hour, if people look like they're not sleeping, if people,
they probably aren't.
They're probably not, exactly. Yeah, not looking healthy, because I think, we notice, we look at people and say, they look tired, or they don't look like themselves, and we can't put our finger on it, and that's oftentimes relating to burnout or stress. So keeping that eye out for those little things that can start to build up before, and trying to intervene, and trying to be, offer those supports earlier on, rather than waiting until, like we spoke about at the start, that crisis point when things really escalate.
Yeah, especially with dementia, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. And like we said earlier, the carer needs to have someone else. Like, really, you need two people who are providing some sort of care. And I think it's getting used to that early as well, even when you don't necessarily need it, but relying on someone else. And so the person that you're caring for also gets used to it, that, Kath isn't the only person, it's not, Kath doesn't have to do everything. Actually, Kate's coming in and she helps me with this. So yeah, it's that early planning and knowing that, yes, you are the primary carer, but even you're going to need someone to help you along the way.
So for a listener, as we sort of come to wrap up today's discussion, and I know things can happen at pace, and we can be surprised, and that need for care can be thrust upon us at perhaps a point in our lives where we're not expecting it. But to the best case that we can plan for it, let's assume we're talking about somebody in their 70s approaching their 80s, assuming we're living well and healthily to that point. What should we be doing and when to start to prepare for ourselves and those that we love? And when should we start?
I think retirement's very interesting. So maybe, when you retire, not to think.
What if you don't?
What if you don't? Well, I think it's great if you don't, actually, too. I think that's a whole other conversation, but I think having meaning and purpose in your life is very important. So even when you do officially retire or work less, making sure that you've got meaning and purpose is probably something that you should focus on, because not everyone wants to play golf 5 days a week. Some people do, some people don't. But as an occupational therapist, I think one of the most practical things you can do is look around where you live and think to yourself, right, if something was to change, if I was to have a fall or injure myself, or something was to happen, how would I go staying at home? Yeah, because home is so important to people. So most people want to stay home as long as they can. But it's about thinking practically. What things can I do now to make it easier so that in 10, 15, 20 years' time, I can still remain at home, and that you've got the choice and power to do that. So I think that is one practical approach you can take, looking at your environment. I think meaning and purpose is the other thing. How do you want to live? How do you want to age? And what's important to you? And what are the things that you still want to continue doing, and how do you want to continue doing them, are things that you should focus on.
I think starting to look at things like your power of attorneys, decision-making, paperwork is really important, wills, which are all things that make us uncomfortable to think about, but they're the things that you want to have discussions about, definitely at that point in time, because you want to have those things in place and you want people to be aware of exactly those things that Kate was talking about, you know, what's important, what's quality of life, what's meaningful and purposeful, but also who do I want to be making decisions for me if I can't, and how do they know what my preferences would be. So definitely getting those documents sorted is really important.
The more I think about it, the more I think I'm going to do a video of instruction.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Then leave nothing to doubt. They might not like all they hear, but it just might be a way of articulating your wishes when you're sound of mind.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for giving us some insight into what is a difficult journey, and any of us can be facing into this at any point in time, and it doesn't necessarily always align with age, sadly, and I'm sure you've experienced that in the work that you do. Tell us again how somebody can engage Thrive. So your business is B2B and B2C, is that right?
Yeah, definitely. Our main focus is supporting organisations so that we can really uplift the workforce really change the way that aged care and supporting people living with dementia happens in Australia. But we certainly do still do quite a bit for carers. So we've got a whole heap of resources on our YouTube channel, for instance. So if you like the scenarios that we gave you today around TEEPA SNOW's dementia approach, we've got a video for carers on there that goes into more detail on that. And certainly we're happy to help with any queries. So if you don't really know where to go or what you're looking for, feel free to get in touch. And if we can't support you, we can definitely send you in the direction of someone who can. We have a lot of different networks across Australia, and we know a lot of innovative people doing a lot of different things to really change the landscape of aged care. So, get in touch.
Fantastic. And the website is
thriveaged.com.
Thriveaged.com. So we'll pop that on screen for the video version, and we'll also make sure we add that into the show notes. And any other tips or thoughts for perhaps some of our midlife listeners as we close out? Any salient pearls of wisdom around this whole ageing journey and aged care?
I think just make sure you're looking after yourselves, because we are the sandwich generation, I think, is how we're known. So we have a lot going on. And like I was saying earlier, it's very easy to lose sight of ourselves in that. But just keep yourself active, keep healthy, ask for help. Don't be afraid to ask for help, and take care of yourselves.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, there's so many people out there who are aging well. I think don't forget that as well.
And I think that's a really important point to call out, Kate, is whilst we're talking about all of the things you might need when you are no longer able to look after yourself, my biggest call out would be make sure you're doing all the work now to make sure that you are aging well and your reliance on others or institutions is reduced because you have done all of the things around keeping yourself fit, well nourished, keeping your strength up, all of those things, because we all know the minute you have a fall, it's downhill. So make sure you're keeping your strength up to ensure that you're in the best possible place to age well and look after yourself for as long as possible.
Exactly. Yeah.
Thanks, guys. It's a confronting conversation, and it's not necessarily one we've explored on The Power of Women before, but given we have a lot of midlife listeners, both male and female, I think it's a really important one. And for our younger listeners, the call out is to make sure that you start doing all of the things right to ensure that you have the healthiest possible journey into the need where you might need to hand over and be supported by somebody else. Until next time.